All right, Dr. Kristian Brown, brother to Kim Brown. Hey, hey, and to Mr. and Mrs. Brown. All right, I saved him for last because, I had to keep you in anticipation. Hello, how are you today?
I'm doing quite well.
Wonderful, wonderful. I don't know, you kind of strike me as a little on the shy side of town, but usually people like this, Kim, they what do they say? Still water runs deep. I see that right here. Let me first just tell everyone all about you. Dr. Kristian Brown, his, doesn't say company, but of course, telehealth. Telehealth is your topic, managing your health care remotely, which we, through the COVID, have experienced, I'm sure a lot of us. The importance of doing that. Dr. Kristian Brown is the youngest. Oh, you're the baby. Hey, me too. He is the youngest of 4 siblings who grew up in the Los Angeles area. He is an alumni of San Diego State University, where he double majored, come on now, in cellular and molecular biology and chemistry. Wow. As an SDSU student, he co-founded the Black Student Science Organization. You go ahead. Dr. Brown then went on to graduate from the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine. Dr. Brown completed his general surgery residency at Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan. We got any Detroit, Michigan people out here? Come on, Detroit in the house. He holds a PhD in biomedical engineering. My goodness, that means you're very, very smart. Amen. He was named as one of the nation's top 12 emerging scholars. Wow. Under 40 by Diverse magazine. And currently, Dr. Kristian Brown is practicing board certificate. He is a practicing board certificate general surgeon and a fellowship-trained kidney and liver transplant surgeon and active fellow of the American College of Surgeons. My goodness. Wow, Mr. and Mrs. Brown, y'all had no idea when he was a little-bitty baby that he would turn out to be so amazing. Wow. So, Dr. Brown, what made you choose this form of medicine and this practice?
Wow, that's I guess that's the origin story for any comic book people out there. I guess to better answer that question, I kind of have to take a couple steps back. I think everybody has done that, and I think that the why and the how a person made really informs kind of an understanding of where they're at now. And so probably to take a step back, and if you permit me a little latitude, I'm probably going to go a little bit off script because
Go for it.
It's funny because I've done a lot of surgery, from trauma to transplant, and been in a number of abdomens, and I have to say, I've never located the anatomical position of the human spirit, no matter what the circumstance, no matter who was in the operating room. I just have never seen it. And I think over the years, I'm a young man still, but over the years, I think that this human spirit has made all the difference. Whether you're talking about businesses or medicine, healing or surviving, it's really the human spirit that has gotten people through, that makes the difference between someone just being treated with medicine and healing and going on to do all those things that they were born to do. And so I'm going to take a little bit of a detour. I want to tell you a quick story, and with our people, stories are very important. And I want to tell you about, and I don't think that he would mind as long as I tell the story with truth and with love, about a young man that I met when he was about 16, 17 years old. And I'll be brief, but bear with me for a moment. I met this young man. He was graduated from high school. Good guy, salt of the earth, great family. He was athletic, young, and that vein that we all find ourselves invincible. The world was his. And he told me at about the end of his high school year, he started having some health problems. And it was subtle, but again, when you're young, you kind of shake everything off. It's just, whatever. Because you didn't really have an engagement with the healthcare system too much at that age. And you started having some weakness here and there, some double vision, things like that. But it would come and it would go. And, didn't make too much of it. I was a young man, he was athletic, played basketball 4 or 5 times a day, robust out there doing this thing, trying to take over the world. And he would graduate from high school and was blessed enough to be accepted into college and making that transition. And the summer between his high school year and college was a very interesting summer, to say the least. These original symptoms that he was having of the double vision, the weakness and all that, got more and more frequent. And he was in this summer program, and he was telling me about this in great detail and passion, and so I'm kind of hanging on his every word as he kind of account this very difficult time he was having. And in this summer program, he had these advisors that were there trying to groom him from being a high schooler to going into college. And he even had aspirations of trying out for the basketball team, and all of this was on his plate at that particular time. But these symptoms of the double vision and the weakness, and he started having trouble walking and some trouble breathing, this was not something that was just a one-off. And he was telling me that, things came to a head when one of the counselors came up to him and said, listen, are you getting enough sleep? Because you look tired all the time. Your face is drooping, your eyelids are down. And another counselor came up to him and said, listen, we have to just ask you something. Are you doing drugs? What's going on? So he knew something outward was not quite kosher. And so, he, coming from a good family, said, okay, I got to pull in some of the troops because something's not quite right. So there was a time, a weekend, where his parents came down to kind of visit him during this summer break and kind of check in with him. And instantly, they both also knew something was not quite right. So a young man was telling me about how they took him to the hospital by the university, and they walked him inside of the urgent care, and he noticed that the woman was kind of distracted because it was a busy day, and she was doing folders and putting stickers on folders, trying to triage who would go first, who would go next, trying to manage the waiting room. And she put the sticker of the young man on the folder, and then she gazed up and looked at him. And she peeled that sticker off and put a red sticker on there and took that man to the back and said, listen, you got to be seen right away. And he was saying how the initial thought was that he was having a stroke or something. Something was just wrong with this young man. And we began to continue the conversation. And so time went on, and one doctor would come in, and another doctor would come in, and the young became the old, and the colored hair became the gray hair. So you knew something wasn't quite right, and of course no one was telling him anything. And, time went on, and then you began to sense from this young man that there was something that they were murmuring about in the back room, what was going on with this. And eventually he said that there was this little 4'2" old doctor that came in with a really big, thick book, put it on the table, came in with a syringe and a needle, and told the young man, this may hurt a little bit. And he poked him in the shoulder and gave him a shot of something. And this young man never had an interaction really with the healthcare system, so this was just like, whoa, what's going on here, right? I went from balling out, playing basketball, feeling like I'm top of the world, to now this old crunchy guy is now shooting stuff in my arm. What's going on? But instantly, the young man said he went back to feeling the way that he used to feel. And he went on to tell me that the gradual decline of his ability, his muscles and his strength, put him in a position where he had to really think that this is the way that I used to feel. The problem is that this particular injection was a testing injection to see if the diagnosis that this whole team or whole armada of doctors came up with was correct. And the reversal of his symptoms was proof positive that indeed this was the disease condition that he had. And so he actually was diagnosed, and it's an ironically kind of funny thing, he was diagnosed with a condition that usually affects white women who are elderly. And here you have a young black man who is basically hit on the head with this all of a sudden. To move the story along, they put him on a medication, and he still was determined to keep going on life's pathway. That's sometimes how we are when we're young. We just say, we just shake it off, we don't keep on moving. And so he started the semester in college, his first semester. And this is the part of, in knowing this young man, where you start to begin to feel. Because he accounted times where he would be in the dorm room, and the medication that they gave him that ability for his muscles to be stronger, but unfortunately it also gave him kind of debilitating cramping of those muscles for about a half hour. And so he would find himself curled up in the dorm room on the cold linoleum because it gave him comfort. And he would account kind of watching all the other people in the dorms go back and forth, laughing, going to parties, going to school, going to class, through a 2-inch gap under the door as he lay on the floor. And no one knew that this was happening to him. But he was feeling as though all of his dreams, even before they come into fruition, was falling apart. And the time came that he had to tell his family, his mother and his father, that this is just not working. The stresses of going to school with this illness that was progressive was just not allowing him to maintain his daily life. So he went back home, and that was a devastating blow. Because not only was this condition for him progressive, but that one strand that was holding him to some of his dreams was now severed. It was almost like, man, he gave up. He would go on to actually have the second option to treat this disease, and that's through surgery. I don't know the logistics of the decision of the timing on it, but it was right around Christmas. It may have been the day before, day after, day of. And the next phase of this, as this young man was telling me, is the recovery. The recovery was gruesome for him. And a particular night, he could narrow it down because he said Dick Clark was on the TV, so it must have been New Year's, the New Year's special. And he found himself in that hospital room. And this is where the physical in our relationship in this story became almost a spiritual. He talked about the fact that it was midnight, just turning midnight, the lights were off in the ward, he was there, and as a young man, he felt for the first time without hope. Because he was on all of these machines, he was hooked up, he was barely remembering the time when he had all of his faculties with him. And he said something very, very poignant to me. He said, he wasn't very spiritual before this, but he realized that life and death were not concepts or themes, but they were actually spirits. And in that night, both of those spirits were in that room. And there was a choice that was on the table. And he also let me know that he had never probably really prayed before that. Yeah, Grandma had prayed for him, and family prayed, but he has never had to go to the throne himself. And I remember him saying that the prayer was something to the effect that, I'm not going to make it through the night. One of these different entities in this room is going to have his day. And that if he was spared, if he was allowed another chance, that he wouldn't go through life walking, he would run the rest of his life. And he would choose the hardest thing that he could think of, and he would do that in God's name. If he was given another chance at the pie. And so the next day, and this is where it was kind of a little bit strange, because the next day he started to get better, started to turn the corner. He accounted to me about a person by the name of Ozzy, who was a respiratory therapist. And bear with me on this one, because this one was a little bit, I got a little chills when I first heard it. But this respiratory therapist would come in, usually after hours, and would help him out, would tell him, you gotta fight through this. You gotta get stronger so that tube can come out your windpipe. There's so much more that you have to do. And the funny thing about it is, in hindsight, in questioning and researching, there never was a respiratory therapist named Ozzy. It was a black man with dreads that was described to me, but no one knew who that was. And, in the curious equations of life, you can fill in the blank. I like to think that may have been his angel. I don't know. I'm not smart enough to make that determination. I'm not authorized, I should say. But he got better. And if you haven't already caught on to this yet, that person, that young man is me. So that's the little punchline there. Amen. He is I and I am him. And so sometimes, we all want to say that, we are surrounded, and we are, by superheroes, but every superhero has an origin story, right? Everything comes from something. And so sometimes what happens is you have to take a step back, and I know I'm supposed to be here intellectual and, nerded up, geeked up and all that, but you know what, like I've been through a lot of situations in the operating room where someone depended upon you to get them through. And it's not just, they didn't want to just be treated. They had dreams, they had aspirations, they got things to do. And so, how do you get there? This young brother right here said something that's very true. It doesn't matter what your business is, what your career is. If you don't weave your origin story, if you don't put something into it that you had to pay for, your product is not going to sell. I'm not the most savvy business person, but I'm smart enough to know that. Mm-hmm. Once you have a story, people will buy your story even if they don't want to buy your product. Mm-hmm. And so as I move forward with that, I not only have listened to people when they were in their worst moments medically, from a physician or a surgeon's point of view, but as a physician's point of view, I also look at it from a patient's point of view, because I've been on both sides of the fence. And so you have to sit back and ask yourself, when does a story become a testimony? Yes. You also sometimes have to say, at one point, because I am a little on the geek side and maybe a little bit on the nerd side, but in those curious equations, mathematical equations, there is a point that exists out there where you stop saying things like goals and you start talking about my destiny. Or you don't use words like, aspirations, you start talking about passion. Or what happens when you use words and terms like calling and blessings, and you don't make decisions, but you use discernment. So, there are times when we have to say to ourselves, even the bad things, even the painful things, sometimes become poetry, right? And I remember one time there was a young man who I saw, and when you go through some things, you see a lot of people who remind you of when you were in that moment. Mm-hmm. And when you engage them from a place that is almost a spiritual, I owe this to that person. And people who are around you don't understand where that energy is coming from. I'll tell you a very quick story. I know time is limited, but I was in Detroit, right? In the D, right? Everybody knows what that means. So there was this homeless guy who came in, and to me, if you homeless in Detroit where it gets so cold, you a raw dog. If you can make it out there, you can make it anywhere, right? Homeless guy came in. He had frostbite. He was in bad shape. And to make a long story short, frostbite, we actually treat in the burn unit as well as burns. It's kind of the same process to get them through and to help them out. And I remember going in there, and I don't know what got into me, but every day I was on that service, I washed this man's feet. I cleaned him up. I gave him probably the worst haircut he has ever had, but I was trying, though. But I felt like I was linked to this guy. And when he had recovered, when it was time for him to go, he had came in with basically a hospital gown on. He didn't have anything. I said, I'm going to hook him up. So I went to the hospital. They got the lost and found, right? And, man, the only thing I could find was this orange shirt where the collar was about this big, some green pants. I could use it that day, brother. And I put this outfit on there, and this guy was just, he was like, this is it. And I felt bad because at the end of my shift, I saw him leaving out, and he had this outfit on. And I was like, oh, man, I did this to that brother right there. But those are the times where it felt as though I didn't go through all that for nothing, And the last thing I'll say is that, and this could not be planned. I'm beyond the chance and happenstance. I don't believe in coincidence and all that. Too much stuff has happened. You know what I mean? At some point, you have to say, is it a plan or it's not a plan? And ironically, I am now a staff surgeon not 100 yards from when I was originally diagnosed with that condition many, many moons ago. I'm in the same hospital, in the same clinic setting, and I look over there, yeah, sure, the furniture is different, the paint's a little bit, touched up, but that was exactly where I was in that room, and doctor after doctor after doctor came in, and no one knew what was going on. No one knew what my future would bring. I've had doctors tell me, don't go on the medicine, it's too stressful. This condition is going to take you out. Keep it quiet. You're not going to physically be able to do that. And here I am now. I don't know, and last, I don't know I'm supposed to tell you guys about your health, and grandma always said, if you ain't got health, you ain't got nothing. I'm supposed to get into the total telemedicine thing. Suffice it to say in one line, the world is changing. Most things are going to go through your phone. Make sure you're savvy with the phone. Ask the questions, get the answers, do the screen. That was pretty much my PSA, okay? Because we all know the challenges that we face as people with melanin. If you have any disease condition, we're pretty much in probably the worst category. There are many theories why, just many reasons we could put out there, but that means that there's also many avenues that we could use to get out of that position as well. Be an advocate for yourself. If you're an entrepreneur, you will ride with your product when no one else believes in you, until they will believe in that. So your own health, I don't care what spiritual, what religious book you ever pick up, everyone has in their context, every one of those has some concept that you are a temple. I don't care if you're talking about Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, everyone has that concept that you are a temple. And so if you can't advocate for yourself in your own temple, if you can't sweep out the dirt out of your own sacred room, don't really expect someone who has no ties with you, who are only doing that for a paycheck, to do it for you. You can't say, you can't go in the exam room and say, your blood pressure is fine. No, what does fine mean? What's the number? So when the number changes to unfine, I don't need to wait till my next appointment to be able to be told that I'm no longer fine. Because I can go down to CVS and figure out the numbers myself. But the interpretation of that numbers is why I am here. I am an advocate for us. Because let me tell you how it's going to go. Because COVID has kind of shown us the way a little bit, unfortunately. The days of going to the hospital, waiting in the waiting room for your 6-month checkup is going to be over. You're going to either be picking up the phone or looking through a camera, and you're going to be talking to someone anywhere in the world. That means that I don't care if you're in Nigeria, Congo, Liberia, you're going to have access to medicine, technology, and even surgery in the next iteration of this simply through your smartphone. Because there's no longer any magic to me sitting in front of you other than the humanitarian and the love aspect. There's no magic of me looking at you and saying, hey, guess what? Your diabetes is out of control. But you knew that when you came in the door. There's no magic to me saying, okay, I'm going to adjust your medications so that your blood pressure doesn't make your hair hurt no more. We could do that over the phone. You can stay in your PJs and get that done. But if you're not up with the technology and the savvy, because people of color have always been left behind when technology speeds up. It's so funny because you can have a bazaar out in the middle of nowhere selling your goods. You don't need the cashier or the cash register anymore. You just get the little cube in the phone, you selling your goods, and just swipe your card right there, and it goes to my account. We good. Medicine is going to be the same way. You're going to put a watch on your arm. It's going to tell me what your blood pressure is, your pulse is, tell me what your blood sugar is, not only today, but for the last 3 or 6 months. You're going to be able to put something on your ear, and I'll be able to tell how you're breathing, and guess what? You and I are not in the same space, whether it's 2 miles or 2,000 miles. We're going to get the job done. So that's my PSA. This is where we're going. But what has to change, and I'll tell you, because we are all family here, what we do is we go in there and we have that almost that complex that they're going to tell us what we need to do and how we need to feel, and we actually give up all of our power when we go into the exam room. There are oftentimes I take off my white coat. I'll just walk in there just with my scrubs on because I don't want us to feel like, you know, I'm talking to a 60-year-old gentleman and he feels that I'm the one who has the seniority in the room. Nah, that's not how it works. I've never been 60, right? So here's some things that I need to learn from this gentleman because it's not, God's not going to promise that you get there. I may be able to give you the data, but in terms of real life, actual living, you got more in your side than I have. So we have to work as a collaboration. The next time you go see your doctor, it's got to be a conversation, not a lecture. Because everyone in here is grown, right? So you have to give a little, but you got to get a little. How many times have someone come in and they say nothing through the whole examination, and they're the sickest one in the waiting room? And then you have someone else who comes in who feels like they have privilege, and they're like, listen, well, I was online, and I talked to my cousin this way, and what I want you to do was I want you to fulfill this list that I got right here. I want you to prescribe me that. And you're sitting there like, okay, I'm literally going to do everything I can to get this person satisfied so I can move on with my day. But who won in that? No one. You have a person who comes in who says, listen, I don't know what this exactly means, Doc, but I need to walk out here with some answers. Let's work together. That's a person who wins. And as a physician, that's a person who I'm also going to call and say, listen, oh, how is that working for you? This is a social call. But I'm now invested in that person. So when you walk in there, you have to be able to get that person on your side. So I know I kind of went a little bit of a tangent there. But that's what I'm about.
That was not a tangent, that was a testimony, okay? And thank you, my brother, for sharing. Thank you so much.